Yes.
Stardate 1126.2021. Welcome back to Star Trek Discovery Pod, the kind of smart, kind of funny podcast about new and classic Star Trek. I'm your reluctant captain, Mike Garcia. With me on the view screen, we have
Mariah Gossett,
Clyde Haynes,
and Grant allegedly will be with us soon. I kind of want to say what he's doing right now because I know what he's doing, but I don't know. That might reflect poorly on him and us.
Hey,
so
just keep in mind that this is a family podcast.
All right.
So you can't, talking about what Grant's doing when he's not here.
Good point. Well, let's move right along. This week, we are streaming the pod live on YouTube. And yes, we do have a few reasons to give thanks this week. First, after some corporate complications that had tons of people pissed off last week, season 4 of Star Trek Discovery is now pretty much available to be watched and enjoyed by fans all over the world. I think that was great that they were able to do that. We'll probably dive into that a little more later. And of course, number 2, we are reviewing yet another brand new episode of Discovery, season 4. Season 4, episode 2, Anomaly. Written by Anne Kofel-Saunders and Glynis Mullins, directed by one of our favorites, Olatunde Osunsanmi. And folks, this was a good one. I'm giving you a preview of my hot freak right there. Before we dive into it, Clyde, can you remind everybody about the live chat?
Yes, if you're watching us live and you want to participate, want to hang out with us, want to ask us questions, want to be in the pod, so to speak, then you can do a couple things. One, type capital P, capital O, capital D, capital pod in the chat, and we'll take a look at that. And if you have a hot freak that you want to share with us, type a capital H, capital F, capital HF in the pod, and we will know that that is your hot freak. I can talk, and I have been on the pod before.
It's been a minute, though.
Been a minute.
He's a little rusty, folks. All right. Like Clyde said, time for hot freaks.
Hot freaks! Hot freaks!
All right. And if you are watching or listening to us for the first time, hot freaks are our quick hot takes on the episode we are reviewing. Like Clyde said, drop us your hot freaks in the live chat if you're watching live. So, okay, hot freaks on Disco season 4, episode 2. Who wants to drop it first?
I'll jump in since I wasn't here last week because I've got comments, just a couple. I'll keep it light, keep it quick. One, I'm not sure if it was said, but I hate these uniforms. Can I just say
what?
I don't like the uniforms.
I
almost like
the
them.
new uniforms.
I almost like them. I don't. To be honest with you, I don't think they're that flattering.
I will say they're a little boxy, but yes. I think they're pretty cool, man. I just love the blast of color that we're getting on the ship. I love that.
That's what I'm saying. I almost like them. Like, I like the idea of them, but I can't get that cool blue with the gold or the silver disco uniforms out of my head. Those were amazing. So I'm just going to say those were my favorites still. But overall, I'm so excited that disco's back. There's so much, if you're a cord cutter, like understanding when that episode that's streaming is out, it's like you're trying to keep it in your head. Or if you're like me, you're thinking that you've got to create a calendar of when things drop. Disco's one of those things that I'm like, yo, it's Thursday. Disco's available. Like, I'm excited about that. And so, and this season has been everything so far that I hoped it would be. It's, I could probably deal with a few more things happening on the ship, but I think the character-driven nature of this season has been phenomenal. I think Anthony Rapp in this episode sometimes I feel like he's such a talent, and everyone is. You got to give him something to do, and this week they gave him something to do, and the emotion that he portrayed was amazing. I mean, can we talk about Book for a second? Like, I mean, this cast is just like they've taken it to another level in terms of being able to convey emotion without having to go too deep into the theatrics. So I thought this was a great episode. I think there's a lot still to uncover with Tilly, and then just having Saru back on the bridge. You know, one thing that's interesting to me about Disco is that you never really have a specific like counselor, like officer, you know, that we've seen before, like a, you know, like a Deanna Troy. But we're seeing that Saru comes into this role as advisor, you know, peace and probably a wartime consigliere. Like he's stepped into this role. And you know, I haven't always been a huge Saru as captain fan, but I'm loving him as the first as number one. Like the first officer is just amazing. So I'm really digging what I've seen. There's so many nuances. This season is going to be something special. So I'm all for it. I know I'm all over the place, but I'm happy.
No, I love it. I love it. You started with the negative energy, but you brought the positivity in the end. So
if you have to think about it like this, Mike, if the one critique that I have after seeing 2 episodes is I almost like the uniforms, you know this is a good season.
That's true. That's true. Mariah, let's hear from you.
Yeah, I really liked that I feel like we finally have the arrival of Discovery as a show, right? Because I feel like every season, not that I have thoroughly enjoyed every season of Discovery, but I feel like now that we are in the place and time where this ship has to exist, we have the characters set in place, and we finally get to have those fun dynamics between our bridge characters. And that's what I feel like I have wanted for so long. So we get the fun quips in the hallway. We get to see Tilly and Culber have like a very sweet and awkward and very Tilly-y moment in the hallway. We get to see Mr. Saru, which is such a fun nod to the original series. We get some Picard references, which is like so fun to see them world building in this way and weaving in the other shows. And I appreciated that we got to slow down for a moment, and it almost felt like watching, I mean, a very action-packed but play between Stamets and Book, because it was just such a character study between 2 very talented stage actors getting to really play off of each other in those scenes together. So I loved this episode. I thought it was great, and I'm really excited to see where the season goes forward. I'm just hoping we get to I felt like I was supposed to understand the anomaly more at the end of this episode, but I did not. But maybe that's where I'm supposed to be left. So we'll see.
All right, very good. I'm gonna echo your thoughts, Mariah. And Grant, we're doing our hot frakes. Grant just joined us. Hi, Grant.
Hello.
I'll give you a minute to collect your thoughts. So while I do mine, but yeah, this is what I'm talking about. Like Starfleet ingenuity and human emotional connection, saving the day in the face of this big bad space anomaly, whatever the hell this was. This was really good. I really enjoyed this one, and I find that it's like a pattern with me that I always seem to really love the second episode of every season of Disco, and I was trying to figure out why that is. And I think it has something to do with the fact that the show always seems to raise the emotional stakes at the end of the season premiere. And then in the second episode, it deals with like all the messy complications of those stakes being raised. And that usually means that we're going to get an episode doing all the cool shit that I love about Star Trek, which is like putting the crew through this mini crisis and forcing them to fight and science their way out of this super tight, dangerous situation, while the emotional stakes are also raised, and we're dealing with the fallout from that. And that's what we got in this episode. Like in this episode, the the physical threat of the anomaly was kind of, they didn't really explain it well, mainly because I don't think the characters don't know what they're dealing with. But I thought the physical threat was pretty impactful, and it was balanced well with the weighty emotion of Book dealing with his like immediate grief, and with Burnham navigating the huge complications of being a captain in the face of like this huge tragedy, and the tragedy straining her deepest personal relationship that she has on the ship. Like, all they really balanced the action and the danger with the emotional weight in this episode. It was all really balanced really well. And like all of our characters got some time to shine in this one. Everybody from Tilly to Adira, like, and yeah, Stamets as well. And yeah, David Ayala just owned this episode. It was so good. But yeah, that streak of awesome second episodes continues for me with Disco with this episode. Grant, what do you think?
All y'all went already?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Not jumping in front of Clyde? Okay.
Nope, you're late.
Let's see. What did I think? Because I literally just watched it. Someone said wet hair. Did you guys say I came out of the shower or something? No,
we left it a mystery.
my hair is just greasy. But my thoughts. Saru is back, which is awesome. The anomaly, which I was kind of like about in the first episode, seems a lot cooler now because it's not just this destructive force, but it's also this unpredictable destructive force. So I think that's excellent. This was I thought it was a powerful and emotional episode, and a little sad. It seems like everyone's sad. It seems like Tilly is, coming out about her depression, and that there's a lot of grief going on for Book, and it's just Adira has some sadness with an impending I shouldn't say breakup, but kind of like a breakup of sorts, with Gray, moving out of their consciousness to a corporal body, a synthetic body thing. That is kind of this loss of safety, and you can tell the grief that they're going through, with coming to terms with that. So a lot of this episode was just kind of melancholy, and I find that when I contrast this with other episodes where it's like a lot of optimism and adventure and action, this was heavier, but that's okay. It's okay to have these occasionally. I hope it's not all of them that are sad, because I need the escapism to be a little bit more joyous here and there.
Well, Grant, I think that's an interesting note, because we've waited for Disco for a while. And while Disco is set way far in the future, I think the truth is, we're coming out of almost 2 years of a pandemic. I wonder
Are we coming out of it?
Let me rephrase that. We're 2 years into a pandemic.
There we go.
I think we're gonna see more weightier, heavier storylines, because I think those are some real emotions that people are dealing with, right? And I think you're tapping into something. It's hard to. I'm not an actor, but I would imagine that it's challenging to play really light, happy, funny characters when the world around you is a little bit strangling you.
I mean, the other thing that's interesting is like this was one of the first bigger scripted shows to kind of go back to full production about like within the pandemic, and I know they were one of the first to set a lot of the sort of safety protocols. So I mean, from what I've heard, they obviously were successful at that, which is great that everyone was able to keep healthy. But I imagine that was also very isolating for all of these actors, because essentially you got to go to work and then you went to your hotel room, or your home in Toronto, and that was it. And then I know that Chat was talking about it, and I've seen Sonequa Martin Green talking about this in some of the promotion for the show, but she went back to work 12 weeks after having her baby, and then also had lost both of her parents in April during production. And so it just has to be like such an intense emotional roller coaster, not only in her personal life. I would imagine that would then play into her. I mean, Burnham is also a very complicated and emotional character, so I'd imagine all of that had some impact on those performances.
I mean, don't get me wrong. I think that it is great and it's beautifully executed how they tackle dealing with people's grief, people's depression, all these weighty emotional subjects. I think that they did such a fantastic job here. Kind of like Clyde's saying, comparing it to what we're currently going through, it's also heavy, but this is essentially what, like, especially you, Mariah, have been advocating for. Like, hey, there's a lot of trauma that is going on here with these characters. There's a lot of impact, and it makes sense to see the weight of that, and they fully leaned into it. And having Hugh there as this perfect representation of, hey, I'm going to be very gentle with all of you and just hold your hand through this. I loved it. I loved that.
Yeah, the placement of Hugh as one of the de facto counselors on the ship is just great, because he really does, like Tilly said, have a light touch with people. And he just seems like just such a solid person that you just want to pour your entire heart out to, and that he'll be a rock for you. So I like them placing him in that space.
Yeah.
Marge says, I wonder if the theme of grief reflects our own experience this past year. Of course. Yeah. These writers are just like all Star Trek writers for the past, 60 years. They're very attuned to what's going on in the wider social consciousness of our wider community. So yeah, that stuff does consciously and unconsciously work its way into the franchise.
Well, and I love the fact that what we're seeing characters who are going through grief and trauma. And I like shows that allow us to think about, well, how should I handle the grief and the trauma I'm going through? The fact that Tilly pulled Culber aside and said, I think I need to talk to you like seriously, like professionally. I mean, that is a great nod to all of us, that when we're going through something, that we should say, I think I need to talk to someone professionally, that you have someone like Saru in your corner that can say, hey, I see what you're going through and I want to help you. Or looking at Book, being able to admit, hey, I wasn't ready. These are all things that when you've been going through what we've all been going through, and it's not just like the specifics of COVID, but it's all the things that the quarantine and the pandemic have brought, whether that is strained relationships or isolation or cabin fever. Like, I think that what we're seeing in this show, which is, Mike, to your point, for the last 60 years, what I appreciate about Star Trek is it's saying, hey, we're going to show you the way if you'll pay attention. And so I look at this and I go, again, I just want to clap and say, this is why I love Star Trek as a franchise.
Star Trek has always been aspirational. And you said it. You hit it on the head, showing us the way, right? And Disco is continuing that tradition. I think when we really need it right now, in a lot of ways. But yeah, Grant, if you want something a little lighter, try Prodigy, Star Trek Prodigy.
Although that also deals with some heavy stuff. So.
Yes,
that's true. The opening episode had like child slavery. So yeah.
Yeah. And
what are you doing to me, Mike?
If you can deal with Dal RL, then yeah, it's good. He started the hell out of me.
We got a few hot frakes from the live chat. I'm going to bring some of those up. Takako says, my favorite thing is that Stamets is now a verb. Yeah. I was going all Stamets here. We have a great hot freight from Chupi here. I loved capital LOVED everything about this episode. The pacing, the intensity, all the French scenes and the scary end. It was what we were supposed to feel in Doomsday Machine, this massive, terrifying uncertainty. Let's talk about the ending, guys. Chupi brought it up for us here. Mariah, you said you were a little like, maybe the show wasn't selling exactly what the anomaly was to you very well. You didn't really understand it. By the time we got to the end, did you feel it as a more of a credible threat for the crew?
Yeah, I mean, it's always, I mean, from the moment we saw it destroy that planet, it's a threat. You know, like they definitely were like, here's the end of episode 1, here's the emotional gut punch right from the beginning, you know, and we're kind of trying to build our way back and prevent that from happening again, right? And I think I don't know, I guess I was just hoping for more of like a hint as to if this was truly like a scientific space anomaly, or if this has a source. Like, is there a villain behind this? You know,
big
like
bad. Yep.
yeah, is there a big bad behind this? And so I think I was trying to like, I was hoping there would be that line, you know, that's like, we've only ever seen this once before in a lab, and the scientists were, you know, and maybe I could hold that, you know, and tell me who it was right at that point. But like, I don't know, I was hoping there'd be something there. But yeah, it's feeling like, you know, it's still very unknown, which is fun to try to figure it out. But I also felt like the burn got built up so much last season, and I felt like a lot of people didn't find the ending so satisfying. So I was like, I almost want a little bit of a tease out, some more breadcrumbs of like, what is the cause of this, right? So that it's like building the anticipation in the right direction for all of us of what this anomaly could be.
I do think, though, that what they're doing is contrasting this with the previous season, whereas the burn was the source of division across, you know, the galaxy. And
this is
now,
bringing everybody together.
yeah, now we're seeing, like, I thought it was really cool seeing the not Vulcan anymore, whatever
Navarre.
they're called. Yeah, Navarre, and the other groups that aren't even really associated with the Federation still kind of stepping up and being like, this affects all of us, so we're all invested in trying to work together to do that, to figure out what's going on here. So yes, this threat has the weight, and without being a particular source, like a particular evil bad guy enemy, it has power to try and bring everyone together finally, and have maybe everyone collaborate to work together to science the shit out of this and figure out a way to contain these. So I think that's it's kind of cool to not have a face to the bad guy yet.
Well, you know,
at the end of this episode, we realize that the expanse of this existential threat, it's something that can wipe you out in an instant, and you don't know where it's going to show up. So there was some talk at the beginning, like we had Federation representatives plus representatives from planets and species all over the galaxy come together to try to figure this out, which is what you were talking about, Grant. But Burnham also mentioned we have to unite and work on this and figure it out, because the Federation is just now coming together. The universe is just starting to connect again. And something like this, an existential threat like this, could really tear everything apart. I think was it the leader of Navarre who said something like, this could cause panic and riots and division if people learn about this. So the threat isn't only a, physical existential threat. It's also a threat of, this could really change the direction that we're heading in. The Federation is building back up, and we're heading back into classic Star Trek territory where everything is aspirational. But something like this could destroy all that. I think that's another level to this threat that I found pretty compelling.
Well, and I want to add that I actually like the fact that we don't have all the information yet, right? Like Mariah, just like you, I was looking and going, okay, so is this a scientific thing, or is this a big bad? but I'm actually okay not knowing, and it's because it's making me curious. It's another thread and a draw, and it's almost like I'm going, my money is on Big Bad, right?
Mhm.
So let's see if I'm right. But the difference that I find that makes this so much different than kind of the burn is one, the burn is, I felt like the burn was this thing that you talked about all season, but it didn't impact you. We got to experience this anomaly tear through Quajon,
Mhm.
right? And in all of the incredible special effects that come along with that. And then we're seeing it rip through the ship. Now, you got to admit, that whole loss of gravity scene
It was
was
fun.
kind of cool, right? Like to see people just go, okay. And then even the moment where Burnham's like, win, and Tilly's like, we can predict, and it's in 2 seconds. Like that type of stuff makes this anomaly very real and tangible to me.
Mhm.
Like I feel like I'm experiencing. The burn was like, we're upset over this thing that happened a long time ago that you don't really know about, but it's pissing us off, and
Mhm.
and it's caused all this beef. Right? It's like, I'm gonna show you this infographic of what happened, but I didn't feel it. And then
Mhm.
it was a letdown when it's like, oh, this is what happened. I don't think I'm trusting the writers. I don't think they're going to make that mistake again. So maybe my expectations are a little too high, but I'm expecting this to be epic.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah, P.W. Gregory says this is the burn. This is if the burn was happening right now rather than 100 years ago off screen. So
See,
true.
he gets me. P Dub gets me.
Well, do you think that it would be better to have a big bad causing this, or for this to be a bizarre circumstance, a bizarre anomaly of the universe that is a
I
driving
mean,
force to unite people? Because if it's also
I,
the chain doing this, I feel like it's almost like too much power to
right.
such a silly
Yeah.
little gang or
Yeah.
something like that.
I would hope so. If I was sitting in the writer's room and I'm trying to write the parallel to the pandemic, but in space, right? So you have like the big thing that everyone has to come together in order to try to solve. But typically there's some sort of action that everyone has to take in order to solve it, which usually means that there's some thing that we
What
all
are you
can have
talking about?
some like there's something that everyone can do to essentially fix the problem, right? Which then is typically there's some sort of man-made action, whether it was like purposeful or not purposeful to have it happen, right? You know, like the transfer of a virus from person to person isn't something people did on purpose in the beginning, right? And then it caused an explosion around the entire globe.
Right.
So it's like, what was the origin, you know, and hopefully that is something that's like a tangible lesson we can take away. So it's like you have to
Right.
figure out what the tangible lesson is, and then what's the action everybody has to take in order to solve it.
That feels like it would coincide with like climate change as well, and
Right.
like how can we be a part of the solution, and do we have it within us to unite on this? And
Right.
the answer is no. But
I
in
mean,
Star
in
Trek,
Star
the
Trek world,
answer
I
is
hope the
yes.
answer is yes.
In the past, the answer was
Yeah.
yes in Star Trek, right? And it was when we're on the precipice of stuff like this, of
Mhm.
natural disasters and political conflicts causing such division and disruption all over the galaxy. That's basically what caused the Federation to take hold. It's like, no, we need to be better than this. We can do better than this, and aim for a better ideal. Let's focus on that. And you know, that's where I would obviously love to see the show go. But yeah, I think they are writing, you know, kind of writing a space allegory for the fallout of the pandemic that we've
But
seen.
doesn't it feel a little too on the nose?
Not really.
No?
Not for
I mean,
me.
I think it would be more on the nose if they're like, there's a new virus spreading across the galaxy.
Fair point.
That would be on the nose
You need
rather
to wear
than
a face Klingon.
Yeah, don't. Yeah,
Everybody
that
put a
would.
tribble over your nose and mouth. Leave it there for the next 2 years. Do not take it off,
Mhm.
especially when you go to Walmart, please.
That would have made me really upset. Marge brings up a good point. I keep looking at Grudge, and I mean, I feel like Grudge is the ultimate like red herring. Like I'm expecting at some point to like get this explanation, and maybe, just maybe, Grudge is just a cat. Is it possible that Grudge
Grudge-
is just a cat?
Grudge is just a marketing tool. That's all Grudge is. It's like, look, we got this cute Maine Coon cat that has a Twitter account on the show. Check it out.
Grudge is gonna nudge something off of a counter at some point and save the world.
Grudge nudge.
The Grudge nudge. Look at
Yeah.
that.
Can we talk about Adira a little bit?
Mhm.
Because I thought that that last scene, like I mentioned this a little bit in the hot freak as well, but the idea that you watch a person you love die, and it's tragic and it's painful and you're going through that grief, and then all of a sudden they reawaken inside your consciousness and you can communicate with them fully again. There's such a powerful, like, psychological protective element, I think, of like, I now have you safe within my mindscape, so if the only way you can die is if I die, and then at least we're dying together. And then to reel back from that to re-experiencing the trauma of, I now have to be vulnerable and have you exist in another body again and be an individual who isn't always with me at all times whenever I need you. Yeah, I would imagine that is extremely difficult to kind of
Grant,
deal with.
add this complication to it, because I love everything you said, and I know that me saying that about something you said is rare, so savor that for a moment. But also, I think the interesting thing about it was we see Gray getting an opportunity to change elements of their physical being. And so one, I was like, that would be so cool, like to be able to remake your physicalness.
I want to be taller.
We're not even. Look,
Can we yesify me a little bit, please?
listen, there are three men on this podcast. We're not going to get into what we may or may not change about our physique. But I will say, I think that from a Adira standpoint, that's got to be interesting. Like, I've been carrying you and this image of you in my mind this entire time, and now you're going to go out and you have the ability to change what that is going to be. There's a sense of loss of control. It's, to your point, Grant, it's like, I get you back, but there is a cost, right?
I thought it was a really beautiful way to kind of tell the story of being like a trans person and getting to change yourself to be the image that you have in your head. And how, that is an adjustment for, your loved ones when you do transition, right? And like changing how you want the world to perceive you to match the way that you perceive yourself. And so it's really interesting to watch these two queer trans characters kind of get to explain it in such a very different way, like within this particular world, and like literally rebuilding the body. I think it's a very, like, kudos to whoever like scripted that scene specifically, because that, I felt like that could have been so much more heavy-handed, but I was like, oh, I see what they're doing here, and I really appreciated it.
What's going on with Gray and Adira is so layered and so specific, but it's one of those things where it's so specific, the everything about it feels universal. Like, we can relate to what's going on with their relationship, and it's just really touching. I think we had Marge in the chat say Gray's storyline of transition is significant. I would say it's very significant. And you're right, they're handling it with nuance and with grace, and I appreciate that.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with both of you guys as far as there's something extremely empowering for Gray of having this opportunity to transition and make changes, small, subtle changes, just to fine tune anything that you want, that would make you happy. But also to Clyde's point, yeah, there is that other little element. You could see Adira going, oh, but I thought we had come to terms that you were liking that mole on your hand, and I just find like how they are navigating these conversations are, both important, but also it's very real, and I like, you
Yeah.
can identify with it, and you feel for people, and it's endearing.
Yeah, I saw Mark's asked this question a few times about Gray's reference to being a guardian. So a guardian in the Trill Society are people who can't host symbiotes anymore. And so I'm assuming because this is sort of a hybrid android type of body that
I believe the actual term is golem, as we learned in Picard.
So because Gray will be a golem, he would no longer be able to host or join a Trill. So they are someone who takes care of the symbiotes. So that would be my assumption, is if they were going to but that also then means that Gray has the thought process of wanting to return home to the planet and not necessarily be on Discovery, which is interesting.
Do we have confirmation that Adira has a symbiote and can access the memories and emotions of the previous host?
Yes.
Yeah, that's what that whole like into the wormhole we go.
My question, I know that, but my question is, since Gray is inside Adira, can she access all those past memories and emotions too? I wonder.
Of Gray?
Yeah, I think she.
Yeah.
Yeah, she can.
No. Can Gray access all that? Since Gray is inside Adira,
does Gray have like a whole backlog of all those other characters?
I feel like what happens is Gray in her mind, Gray in their mind. Thank you. Gray talks to the other past host, right? Like it's almost like they share this space inside of consciousness, but they're individuals inside of Adira's.
Yeah, because prior to Adira, Gray was the host, and so Gray's mind would have had access to all of those things prior to. So I would imagine they are all there. They might not be able to access them with the same ease as Adira can at this point, because I would assume after they separate consciousness, I don't know, that'll be an interesting question for them to sort of explore, like what happens when you do finally separate the consciousness, right? And you're no longer sharing that.
Yeah. I am fascinated by this from the standpoint of, I think that one thing that when I think about Star Trek, especially the old Star Trek, right? Like for the most part, we get these characters and we start to see their background. And with the exception of a couple characters that are typically android or android-like who are trying to be human, or even Klingon trying to be human, by and large, we don't see a whole lot of incredible transformational growth through individuals, right? But I think what we're seeing with Adira and Gray is this idea that people grow, mature, evolve, change, transform. And for some of us, that causes us to have to come in terms with, well, what do you do when someone that you have loved, cared for, known, been close to changes, and sometimes radically? And I think what we're looking at is Adira has been used to having Gray a very particular way for quite a while now. And now Gray is on the precipice of being able to actually transform into something quite different. And I think Adira is at the point where they have to understand that this is happening, and how they show up in this instance is important, but it could be different, and you have very little say over this transformation. I think that's an important message, and a very subtle one that I think they've done well with really just talking about a mole. And I love the fact that Adira didn't go, I mean, I think there was a comment like, I thought you liked the mole, or you were comfortable with that mole, but it wasn't like, but I really like your mole. Like it wasn't like that.
Right. And that scene also lays the groundwork for just a lot of potential conflict and growth between that relationship, that it's just not going to be a kind of boring, been there, done that, happily ever after when Gray gets the body, right? I want to go back to the real quick. I want to go back to the idea that Gray might be leaving to go back to Trill since he wants to be a guardian. Takako points out from Memory Alpha, the Trill Guardians were a group of usually unjoined Trills dedicated to the care of the Trill symbionts. So on Discovery, we see that the Trill is inside Adira, a human, which makes the Trill symbiote vulnerable. So it stands to reason that if Gray wants to be a guardian, the best place he can be is on Discovery, taking care of the symbiote that is inside Adira, because it's isn't it the first time the
Yes.
a symbiote is inside a non-Trill host? Yeah.
That makes sense. And I thought that there's a really cool parallel as well with how Adira was remarking on the kindness, the patience, and just listening that Gray was doing to Adira's problems. A nice parallel to Hugh, to Culber doing that as well for multiple people on the ship. And it's I guess just this idea that they seem to be underlining of be there for your people, be there for everyone, and just be patient and listen. It's not always the exact same situation when you're navigating grief. Grief is very different for everyone. And like Culber was saying to Stamets, it's like, let Book kind of guide you on how Book's navigating grief, and let that be the way you talk to Book. And they did a great job in this episode of kind of emphasizing these elements from multiple angles.
Yeah, this one was really about what it is like living on one of these ships and how people can benefit from community if they accept it. Right. And book, I think he has accepted the community on the ship to a bit, even though it's new to him. But in his extreme fresh grief, he was just alone, and he was unable to do it until he had that connection with Burnham at the end. And her words were so clear that we're all here for you. And she actually echoed Stamets, who said that earlier. And then he finally accepted and realized that, and that allowed him to ride the wave, man, and get out of there.
Well, there's this other beautiful element about this show that, Stamets was saying, or Culber was pointing out to Stamets, like, hey, you've been through a traumatic incident too, so you can identify you went through grief. But if you think about it, Book is just one more person in a long line of people in this show who are all orphans. They all have lost their entire world. All of our Discovery crew jettisoned into the future to save their timeline, and they lost everyone and everything that they know as well. So very similar to Book, they've actually all gone through this, and now it's about this family on the ship, and Book is one more orphan being blanketed by his newfound family.
Yep.
Yeah.
Hey, Mariah, I know you are always looking forward to a good holodeck episode. What did you think about the Well, okay, answer me this: it's not a holodeck, but it's a holo emitter that can be in any room. Is that what we saw?
Yes.
Yeah.
Which is a badass choice. And I'm loving Michael's captain quarters. The ready room, I think, looks great. And then I love the holo aspect, and I hope we get to see that used more often and fun in different ways. Because they can project holograms like anywhere. Like all of their controls are just like them doing random hand gestures in the air at all times.
You want to get rid of that mole? Let me wave my finger around it. It's gone.
It's gone. So I think I really enjoyed that, and I hope we get a fun holodeck experience, especially because now we've formally introduced Zora, our computer. So this is the first time we're getting to hear the computer has selected a name, and we're slowly building to that short trek that we got, that's like the farthest into the future we've ever seen, where we definitely see the Calypso, where we've seen a lot of use of the holo. So I'm hoping there's some fun things in there. But I thought it was really fun, and I thought it was like really nice to get to see Burnham letting us in a little bit about where does she go to kind of like find her composure, and it's going back to Vulcan / Navarre.
Well, I
And
mean,
and her embracing Saru and everybody embracing the return of Saru was
Yeah.
also really sweet and important too.
we also get from a Holo-tech standpoint the fact that you've got Stamets sitting in book ship
Mhm.
as a Holo interacting with things.
Yeah.
I think they've upped the Holo-tech in this. And I gotta say, one of my favorite lines of the whole episode was when Stamets is trying to talk to Book, and Book is like, I've been on the ship 5 months, and this is the most you've talked to me the entire time. I thought was like a great way to let, I don't want to say broke the fourth wall, but that Star Trek jumping ahead of a bunch of Star Trek fans talking about, hey, how come all of a sudden Stamets cares and we've never seen these two really in a room together?
Yeah. I want to go back just real quick. Marge gave you some props, Grant, which I agree with. Great point that they are all orphans. I think that is just a running theme on this show that's so strong and powerful. But I want to jump to we have some theories in the chat here. So let's have some fun with these theories. Can somebody read WYSIWYG's theory? It's kind of
Sure.
small on my screen.
Yeah. Pod, my anomaly theory is that the Mirrorverse Grudge walked across the keyboard of the prototype spore drive, and that's why the anomaly looked like a cat eye at the end of this episode.
That was kind of weird, I gotta admit. Like, I wasn't sure if that was like, I was like, what am I looking at? Is this a face? Is this like an Egyptian hieroglyphic? Like, what is
Okay, was that supposed to be the anomaly, or was that just a warp signature at the end, that kind of eye shape? What was that?
The eye shape also looked similar to something that happened in Voyager, and now I'm trying to remember what it was.
Chat, if you remember the Voyager reference.
The Pioneer anomaly, potentially.
Kern says, also could be that new Pathfinder drive that Starfleet is developing. Yeah, I think we mentioned this last week. The president mentioned they're developing a new spore drive and something called a Pathfinder drive. So they're fucking with all kinds of like weird space time travel shit over at Starfleet headquarters. So who knows what they're doing to space?
That would track. I mean, typically, anytime Starfleet starts to mess with like drives and warp signatures, something blows up and causes a catastrophe. So that makes sense.
Yeah, Chupi and other people are answering my question. The anomaly was that eye shape. It's like a black hole. That's what the black holes look like.
Ah.
Yeah, the black holes have an elliptical look in real life.
A gravitation
ellipse.
A gravitation ellipse was from Voyager One Small Step. It was a fast-moving anomaly that can travel through subspace, normal space, and even other dimensions. The ellipse was drawn to electromagnetic energy, such as those emitted by spacecraft, which is interesting because we have not had warp drives for a very long time, right? Because of the dilithium issue.
Discovery did it.
So, Mariah, are you saying that basically it's like if we all went to like solar energy, now all of a sudden we have combustible energies again, and it's causing all kind of environmental issues?
Yeah.
Only in space.
Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'll buy it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Question for you guys: the hologram stuff. I mean, I got the nod to Picard that Picard was a synthetic, one of the first ones, and they didn't really do it too often because a lot of people's consciousness didn't take whatever. But we also saw in Picard that his room could be a hollow, whatever you guys are talking about, a holodeck that could move around, or based on his office in Picard, the ship could become its own kind of holodeck.
Mm-hmm.
Right. He made it look like his room at the chateau. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Right. But we also saw these hollow people based on the soccer dude. I'm sorry, I'm not good with the names here, but the guy who played soccer, the pilot in Picard.
The holodeck doctor.
Rios.
Okay, yeah.
Rios.
We saw that there could be other versions of him that were holograms. Are there other hologram people in Trek?
Yeah, very much. They're
Oh, okay.
typically they've been emergency computer programs. Like if your doctor dies, there's a holographic doctor that can temporarily replace that doctor.
Mhm.
Okay.
Unless you're Voyager and you're stranded out in the middle of nowhere and you can't find another doctor, so that holographic doctor becomes one of the main characters of the show for 7 years.
Yeah, but it's not like it's like someone's information has been downloaded into a program. It wouldn't be like a conscious being could not really function
okay.
completely as a hologram, because that's how we saw Gray in the first place at the end of last season. Was the Holo could detect that there was another consciousness present and created the holographic version.
Is that what they use, that idea, in order to have Stamets be a hologram present, like a human consciousness hologram present on Book's ship? Then
It seems like it's a tech that must have been developed in the between time, because it was definitely something that would have been almost possible in the Picard era. So it would make sense that it's something that, you know, you could essentially plug in and be hologrammed into another space.
someone also said Holo Janeway, but that's another programmed version,
Mhm.
right? That's not her actual conscious.
Correct.
Right.
But that's interesting because I mean, we got the Picard reference. I'm curious if we will get a very vague Lower Deck or Prodigy reference.
I don't
Maybe
see
we'll
why
get a
not.
Captain Freeman.
Well, I mean, to me, I think so often we see this big separation between it's almost this canon separation between live action and animation.
Mhm.
Like if we get a reference to Lower Decks and to Prodigy, to me, what that would symbol is that we fully embrace these animated properties
Validation.
Yeah. What
as
if there's
canon.
a USS Boimler? Like, what if the new
That,
ship is
first
a
of all,
Boimler?
I don't. The only problem with that is Discovery doesn't typically have that type of humor in it, but it would be hilarious.
Maybe not a whole ship, but maybe there's like a Boimler shuttlecraft.
I mean, I
No,
just
no,
need
that-
like a Freeman reference or
Right, yeah.
something like
A Shax or a
that.
This the series finale of Lower Decks is going to be people on Discovery watching a hologram version of an event that happened, but it's going to be played by the actual actors, like
that would be incredible.
Jack Quaid and all them. Yeah,
I mean, to
That's gonna be
that
awesome.
point, what would be interesting if we saw something like that and they did live, like it was live action instead of
right.
it's
That's what I
almost
meant.
like
Yeah,
a whole, that would be hilarious.
kind of like the last episode of Enterprise, but fun. You know.
Eugene Cordero is going to have to really start putting on some muscle.
He's got
Oh,
it.
and if we did have the USS Boimler, CJ Higgins says we would have a Boimler poop deck. Poop jokes. Thank you.
Yes, very Lower Decks of you.
Anything else you guys want to say about this episode of Disco before we wrap?
I mean,
Shout out to the bridge crew who each got like this like freeze frame close up of just like smiling or looking. Like I thought, like sometimes I feel like there's so many of them that we wait till we get this one episode, but each one of them had a moment kind of on camera that I thought was kind of cool.
yeah, and we got Bryce sort of saved the day. We got lots of good I felt like interactions between like Oo and Dittmer and Michael, and so it's really starting to feel like there's a cohesive grouping there. I am worried about Bryce. I don't think you were here for this last week, Clyde, but I feel like we're probably getting set up for somebody is gonna have to die this season.
Well, I think I think you said this earlier. You opened the show with this, Mariah, that it's settling in to Trek. Like I agree with you. I've loved every season, but for a while there, it felt like we were getting like a new series every season, and now it feels like this is Trek, and Trek that we know is an ensemble to solve problems.
Yeah,
And
that's true.
this is really one of the first times we've seen the bridge crew come together to actually solve a problem. And they're like, well, we could do this. And it's like, well, could Detmer do this? And Owo do that's what we know of Trek. And I like that. And I don't disagree that I think that we're getting a lot of Bryce FaceTime. And at one point I'm watching and I was like, okay, he's wearing a gold shirt. So that could be good, but technically so was Tasha Yar when she bit it. So
Choopy says in all caps, no one is dying. Stop it.
Okay.
Nobody's dying.
Yeah, a good comment here from Charlie, who said, have you guys noticed this season they're using Owosakan's full name rather than shortening it to Owo all the time?
At first I thought the Owo thing was fine, was cool, but it felt kind of awkward after a while. I like that they're using her full name.
Yeah, especially because like no one else is getting the shorthand, right? You know, it'd be like one thing if everybody had a nickname, but
like, yeah, they're not saying Mikey for Michael Burnham.
Michael Burnham.
One comment I wanted to make was the uniforms looked awesome this episode. I was really loving them all in the beginning of this episode.
Yes.
Did you guys already say that?
Clyde doesn't like them.
Clyde hates them.
This is what I'm talking about, Grant. I love you on the podcast, but we rarely agree on anything.
I think they look great. And I know I saw there's an interview today with Anthony Rapp, and he was talking about how apparently these new uniforms are so comfortable. They're like almost pajama like, but they have some neoprene in them, which makes them really warm, which he said he likes because the sets are very cold. So
Hey.
I thought they looked super cool. And, you know, it's such a quick fix from the season 3 finale where they had those gray ones with like the red stripe or yellow stripe.
Yeah.
Instead it's all red with the darker stripe going down, and that with all the pins that they're doing, the emblems on there, it just, I love seeing all of the different colors of the uniforms of the different groupings of people, especially now that I have a better association of what those are from watching Lower Decks.
yeah.
It's cool because, you know, Discovery was my first kind of foray into Trek, and everyone had blue uniforms, so it wasn't really until diving into some of the movies, I guess, but really more so Lower Decks, where I saw, oh, okay, each of these are groupings based on specialties, and you see that.
Yeah, the color differentiation was needed, especially to pop them out of that dark blue background. And Carmen says, I love the uniforms too. The asymmetrical hems are cool. That was a detail I didn't notice until this episode, though the hems are asymmetrical. And I think that just looks awesome.
It's like they always have a French tuck. I feel like Tan France would be really excited.
I'm still on the fence a little bit. I almost there. And I was noticing like you've got Saru and he's got this badge. And I couldn't help but think like, well, you know,
it's a brooch.
Whatever. My thought was, how much flair are you gonna have, and will you have enough flair on your uniform? You don't have to have you
need
minimum,
13 pieces of flair at least. Yeah.
I'm just saying, like, I'm just wondering, like, I'm not so sure.
Drew is fire in his uniform.
All right, look, I'm clearly
That's right to you as well,
the
Clyde.
minority in this in terms of my liking of the uniforms. I love the coloring. I'm just not quite sure about them. Just not quite sure.
All right, you'll love them by 2 episodes in. You'll love them. Yeah, love them.
And by the time you love them, I'll hate them.
Nah, that's how it works.
Accurate.
Okay. Thanks everyone for tuning into the pod live. Listeners, if you're listening later, thank you so much for listening. We'll be back next week with another dive into Discovery Season 4 with a review of the 3rd episode. Mariah, how can people find us and stuff?
Yeah, so you can visit StarTrekPod.co to find all of the ways that you can support this podcast. You can find links to watch the video version. You can find links to download the audio version. Make sure you hit subscribe. And if you want to watch us on YouTube, you can hit subscribe and that notification bell so that you know when we are going live. Clyde, how else can people find us on the internet?
I think you should follow us at Star Trek Pod on Insta and Twitter. You want to know what we're up to, what's going on? That's one of many ways to keep in the loop of what's popping.
All right. I guess I'll jump in next and just say you can also support us over at patreon.com/Star Trek Pod. Go there and make a per episode pledge of $2 an episode, and you can join us on our exclusive Star Trek Slack channel. If you don't know what Slack is, it's just like a chat group. And we'll send you a link to it. It's pretty cool. We got a bunch of great people there, and they will welcome you with open arms. And Clyde is coughing the number 2 for $2. That's patreon.com/Star Trek Pod. We love you guys.
We do. Thank you so much for joining us again. And remember, live long and prosper.
Bye.